Hello, I'm David Bowman. I am the tutoring coordinator for the Three Rivers Literacy Initiative, a project of the Three Rivers Education Foundation. We're going to take a few minutes and talk about phonics instruction. When we say phonics instruction, what do we mean? What does it look like in practice, and what do we know about effective instruction? So first, let's take a look at a broad definition of what do we mean by phonics. In a nutshell, phonics is the ability to look at printed text and turn it into speech sounds. It's really taking graphemes, which is letters and letter combinations, and turning them into phonemes or sounds and sound combinations. So, unlike phonemic awareness, where we were only thinking about the sound, here with phonics, we are specifically going from translating print into speech. So there's a lot of different kinds of graphemes or letter combinations that students need to wrestle with. I mean, we have everything from hard and soft vowels and consonants and digraphs and blends and diacritic marks and silent E's and a lot of things. And then to be even a bit more complicated, we have to deal with the issues around aspirated and non-aspirated sounds, those that create a little puff of air and those that don't. We have to deal with voiced and voiceless sounds, those that make the vocal cords vibrate and those that don't. And then, of course, we have that crazy schwa, that sound that any unaccented vowel is going to produce in a word. So there's a lot that has to happen. It's a fairly sophisticated mental process then, as you can see, of turning print into speech. But fortunately, the actual instruction in phonics is not really all that complicated if we understand the three major skills, phonics skills, that students need to learn. The first type of phonics skill we call synthetic phonics, which is where letters and letter combinations have specific sounds, so we can sound them out individually and then we can blend them together to make a word. Like in cap, we have three letters. Each of those letters has its own sound relationship. We can produce the sounds, put them together, and now we've got cap. So that's synthetic. We are synthesizing the sounds into words. Then the second set of phonics skills we call analogous skills, analogous phonics, which is basically where we look at similar letter combinations across words. So like with flower, if we know that OWER is pronounced hour, then we can look for other words, or if we find other words that have that same combination of letters, we know it's probably going to be pronounced about the same. So we're comparing the spelling and pronunciation of this word with the spelling and pronunciation of that word to give us clues about how the words are pronounced. And then there are the analytic phonics skills, and really this is more along the lines of just memory and being able to see a word and know automatically how it's going to be pronounced. And it turns out that's actually a pretty important skill because many times in English we have words where the letters do not correspond directly to specific sounds. Like fight, we have that IGHT. Well, we don't pronounce the G and the H, they're actually silent in this case. So we don't pronounce it as igot, we pronounce it as ite. So we just have to remember that that IGHT is going to produce the sound ite. Well, once we become familiar with that, then we can go back to our analogous phonics skills and say, okay, if other words have that IGHT, they're probably going to be pronounced in a similar way. So you see, if we can develop skills and give kids practice in all three areas, then they really are going to have a very robust chance to be able to correctly translate print into speech. And all three of these skills quite obviously relate to one another. We need all three types of skills, so we provide practice and training in all three types of skills. So with that being said, let's take a moment and look at what do we actually know about providing phonics instruction. And the first and most important thing to remember is that phonics instruction is best provided when it is explicit and systematic. When it's explicit, meaning we are going to study this letter combination and see how it's used. And systematic, meaning we're going to pre-plan. We're going to do this one, then this one, then this one. And we're going to get increasingly sophisticated and more complex over time. So explicit and systematic. Well, while we are doing that, we're only going to be focusing on one or two phonemes at a time. We're not going to try to learn everything all at once, just one or two. And we're going to give kids a lot of practice. We're going to repeat the instruction in multiple ways to help their brains to develop patterns that will eventually lead to automaticity. So explicit, systematic, focusing on one or two phonemes, and lots of practice. Now, there's one principle of instructional design that I want to share with you, and that is we don't want to do phonics instruction in isolation from text. So as we're looking at some explicit letter sound combinations, we are very quickly going to turn to real text and see how those words are used within text. We don't want to do all the phonics stuff over here, then somewhere down the road, come over here and do some reading. We want to study and apply, like that throughout. Okay, so, and really what that means is we're always pushing kids towards meaningful text, and we're immediately applying what it is that we learn. Now, what does this look like? What do the strategies look like that we know work? So the first is guided oral reading. And guided oral reading is going to do a couple of things for students. For one, it's going to give them lots and lots of practice in making that translation from graphemes to phonemes. It also gives you, as the tutor, a good opportunity to listen for those places where students might be struggling and give you some clues about what instruction is going to be needed. We're also going to be looking at word clusters. Those are words that have similar graphemes in there. That's what's going to give us the fat cat sat on a hat and a rat. Okay. We're also going to look at both sight words and phonics. Now that might seem like a strange thing to say sight words and phonics, but in a certain sense they're different. See, if we're looking at sight words, we get our flashcard and we say, okay, here's this word. Here's how we say it. Okay, here's the word again. Let's say it. Here's the word again. How do we say it? How do you say it? Okay, we're looking at recognizing whole words, but we also, and that's important, but we also need to give students a chance to practice sounding out words and practice sounding out those various graphemes within words that they can then blend together to create whole words. So it's got to be both. Certainly, whenever we're providing instruction in phonics, we always want to make sure that not only are we helping kids to pronounce the words, but we help them to understand a meaning of those words, and then we look at text and see how those words are used. So we're always going to match the phonics with word meanings and with vocabulary development. And then certainly anything around identifying graphemes within words, blending graphemes, matching or comparing them, modifying words to swap out graphemes, any of those types of activities are going to be very useful. And finally, writing. Writing turns out to be pretty good practice for students in making that oral to text translation. It gives them lots of opportunities to practice doing that. My only caution is that if you decide to use writing as a phonics exercise, make sure that the writing that they're doing is connected to the text that they are studying. And by that I mean, maybe you've read some text and you give some kids some prompts for some questions, or you ask them to write a reflection about the text. That's going to give us the writing practice, which will help with phonics. But then we need to take what they have written and turn it into discussion and other types of comprehension activities. So we're not separating out the phonics instruction from the reading instruction. They need to go together. Now, on the flip side, what doesn't work? Well, certainly incidental instruction has been shown not to be effective for phonics instruction. And by incidental, I mean we're just going to read passages along, and if we stumble on something, we're going to look at it, and then we're going to move on and hope that by some magic students will remember every sound letter combination they stumbled on and the correction, and they can just somehow manage to never make that mistake again. It really doesn't work like that. Phonics instruction needs to be explicit and systematic. Along with that, any type of computerized instruction is not going to be very useful and for many of the same reasons as well. The fact is, a computer program is simply not going to be able to provide the kinds of guidance and instructional planning and feedback and responsiveness that you can provide as a tutor, as a live person. So those are all out. And the last one is sustained silent reading. This simply doesn't work for phonics because there is no phonics included. If you're reading silently, you are not working on taking the printed symbols and translating them into speech sounds. That's not what you're doing because it's silent. So that is also not going to work for phonics instruction. Now, the last thing is, you've heard me say it before, but we know that instruction in any of the reading components is best delivered when it's combined with certain other reading components or instruction in those other components. And the same is true for phonics. Certainly, if we're talking about the letter sounds, we have to have an understanding of what those sounds are within particular words. So we need to combine or pair phonics instruction with instruction in phonemic awareness. Then with vocabulary, if we can pronounce words, we have to be able to study what do those words mean. We can actually go back and forth with vocabulary. We're learning new words. Let's see how they're spelled, how they're represented in the symbols. And if we're looking at words that are printed, what do those words mean? So always going to be combining those two. And finally, with comprehension, now that we can say those words aloud, now that we know what they mean, how are they used in text and how do they contribute to an overall understanding of a passage? So all of those are going to go together: phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, and comprehension. Well, that in a nutshell is what we know about phonics instruction. I did want to make a personal thank you to you as tutors. We see the growth that students make, and we know and we recognize that students' growth is because of the effort and the thoughtfulness that you're putting into your instruction and the time and the energy that you're giving to these kids. So for that, we want to say a very heartfelt thank you for all you do as reading tutors with the Three Rivers Literacy Initiative. Again, I'm David Bowman with the Three Rivers Education Foundation. Thank you and have a good day.